Hello, everyone. I'll never forget that particular Saturday morning. It was the day everything started to fall apart. We were fast asleep, enjoying the peace of the early hours, when Helen suddenly took me by surprise. She was unusually assertive, something I hadn't seen from her in the 20 years we'd been married. In bed, she was aggressive in a way that was both unexpected and raw. For the next 20 minutes, what we shared wasn't gentle love. It was primal, intense, and completely uninhibited. By the time we finished, we were both soaked in sweat, completely spent, and utterly satisfied. Looking back, I realized that's exactly what she intended because, in the haze of post-coital bliss, she dropped a bombshell. "Travis, how much do you love me?" she asked softly, her voice deceptively sweet. Normally, a question like that would make me stop and think about what was coming next. But in that moment, still wrapped in the afterglow, I didn't put much thought into it. I just smiled, raised my left hand, and pointed to my wedding ring. "See this ring, babe?" I said, relaxed and content. She nodded with a quiet yes, her fingers lazily trailing over my chest, making me feel even more at ease. "Well," I continued, "this ring is a circle, unbroken, endless. That's how much I love you, Helen. Infinitely, like this ring. Forever." She leaned in to kiss me, a kiss that hinted there might be a second round in the works. But before that could happen, she pulled back, her expression shifting. "Travis, I need you to really think about something seriously," she said, her tone suddenly heavy. "Promise me you won't get mad or jump to conclusions about what I'm going to ask. Can you do that?" Still feeling mellow and far from alarmed, I nodded without much thought. "Sure, Helen. What's on your mind?" Her hands moved gently across my chest as she hesitated, gathering her thoughts. "Travis, some of the girls at work have talked about their boyfriends, their stamina, what they can do in bed. These young guys, they're just so full of energy, you know? And I can't help but notice that well, you don't seem to have that same drive anymore." She paused, clearly trying to choose her words carefully. Then, as if summoning courage, she blurted it out. "If you really love me, as much as you say you do, would you let me experience an uninhibited, one-time encounter with another man?" I felt my body stiffen as a wave of anger started to rise. I shut her down immediately with a single, firm word. "No." And with that, I got out of bed and headed outside to do yard work, leaving no room for further discussion. Helen, however, was nothing if not persistent. Over the next few days, she kept trying to bring it up in different ways, even offering me the same opportunity with a younger woman. Each time, I calmly but firmly told her it wasn't happening and that she needed to drop the idea. A few weeks passed, and I started to believe the issue had been laid to rest. But then something else hit us. Helen's company downsized, and she lost her job. She began searching for work, but being a 45-year-old secretary in this economy didn't yield many opportunities. Her days were either spent pounding the pavement or glued to the computer, and I had no idea what she was doing online. One day, I came home to a scene I didn't know how to process. Helen greeted me at the door wearing nothing but a garter belt, stockings, and heels, holding a martini. I should have been suspicious. It was completely out of character for her. But the sight of her like that short-circuited any logical thoughts I might have had. I just went with it. An hour later, I was utterly spent, drained in every way. Helen was insatiable, like a wild animal, and for the first time since her layoff, I thought her unemployment might have some upsides. That is, until she ruined the moment. As she returned from the bathroom, her expression gave away that something was brewing. She slid back into bed, cuddling close to me, and said, "Travis, I need to tell you something, and I want your promise that you won't get angry or storm off before we've had a full conversation." Okay. My gut told me this wasn't going to be good, but I reluctantly agreed. "Fine, Helen. What is it?" She nestled closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Do you know how I've felt these past few weeks? Do you understand what it's like to be turned down for jobs because I'm overqualified, only to see some 20-something with half my experience get hired because her looks are more appealing?" Her voice cracked, and I could hear the frustration and hurt she'd been bottling up. I wrapped an arm around her, trying to offer comfort. "No, I don't know, Helen, but you're beautiful, smart, and capable. You'll find something. It won't be because of your body, but because of your talent and hard work. You've got this. She squeezed me tighter, tears threatening to spill. Then, she dropped the real bomb. Travis, I might have found a job here in town. It's with a man who owns an insurance agency and needs a personal assistant. He's a friend of someone I've been talking to. I felt a pang of suspicion. Who's this man? And how did you meet him? She hesitated for just a moment too long. His name is Ronald. I met him on a dating website. I nearly jumped out of bed. You met him where? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. Helen gently pulled me back toward her, her tone shifting into the soothing, almost condescending one my mother used when explaining something to me as a kid. Travis, sweetheart, you know how rough things have been for me since the layoff. I just needed something to lift my spirits, she began, her words deliberate. So, I put my picture on a website for married women looking for single guys. It wasn't about anything serious, just a confidence boost. And it worked. I got a ton of attention from men who were interested in me for me. It made me feel good about myself again. I shook my head, struggling to contain the anger building inside me. I can't believe you do this, not just to me, but to us. Helen stayed calm, reminding me that getting angry wouldn't solve anything. She urged me to let her finish, and reluctantly, I agreed to hear her out. Through the site, I met a man named Ronald, she admitted. We started emailing. He's a businessman with a lot of connections, and when I told him about losing my job, he set up an interview for me with his friend. It's tomorrow. She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. Before she could continue, I cut in. Let me get this straight, Helen. First, you post your picture on a dating site. Then, this guy, some random man you met online, sets up a job interview for you. And now, because he's done you this favor, he probably thinks you owe him something in return. And on top of all that, you expect me to sit back and let this guy have sex with my wife as some sort of thank you? And you're telling me it's just a one-time thing. Do I have all that right? Helen flinched at my outburst, her body trembling as she tried to pull away, but I held her in place. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stammered. No, it's not like that, Travis. Ronald is a gentleman. He doesn't even know I'm married, and he hasn't told my prospective boss anything about how we met. I love you, Travis, but I need to feel wanted by someone other than my husband. Can't you understand that? I couldn't. No matter how hard I tried, her logic just didn't compute. But I took a deep breath, hoping to calm her down. Gently, I began rubbing her back, whispering meaningless reassurances. It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. For a moment, it seemed like she might settle, but then she spoke again, her voice firmer. You said you love me, Travis. I love you too, but this isn't about love. I could have gone behind your back and done this without you ever knowing, but I didn't, because I respect you too much for that. I'm asking for your blessing, for this one-time experience. After it's over, I'll never bring it up again. Please, Travis, show me how much you love me by letting me do this. I opened my mouth to respond, but she continued, now adopting a softer, more placating tone. Darling, think of it this way. Remember last summer when you lent the neighbor our lawnmower because his was broken? I mumbled, yeah, I remember. Well, she said, when you got it back, it was still the same mower. It worked just fine. Lending it out didn't change anything. That's all this is, Travis. I'll come back to you, and nothing will be different, except I'll show you, in ways you can't imagine, how much I truly love you. Her twisted logic hit me like a freight train, leaving me both furious and stunned. I could see just how badly she wanted this, and it scared me. Deep down, I knew that no matter what I said, she was going to go through with it, approval or not. Barely holding back my rage, I finally replied, fine. I see that you've already made up your mind, and nothing I say will stop you. But before you go through with this thing, I want to meet Ronald. Got it? Her face lit up, as if I'd just given her the green light she'd been waiting for. She kissed me, then jumped out of bed and began dancing around the room, still wearing nothing but her garter belt and stockings. Watching her act like a giddy teenager, I realized this was the moment our marriage truly began to crumble. After spinning around the room, she suddenly stopped and exclaimed, "I have to email Ronald." Then, without another word, she darted out of the bedroom and straight to the computer. I sat there, stunned, unable to process how my once conservative wife had turned into someone I hardly recognized. It was like watching a schoolgirl find out her crush had asked her to prom. Feeling like an old man, I forced myself out of bed and headed for the shower, hoping the water would wash away the bitter taste of the night's events. The rest of the week passed in a blur. To my surprise, or maybe not, Helen got the job Ronald had arranged for her. She was practically glowing as she announced her plans to spend the entire night with him that Friday, only coming home Saturday morning. I thanked her for the update, though the pain her words inflicted was almost unbearable. She didn't seem to notice or care. Helen threw herself into preparations for her date, buying a new dress, shoes, and accessories, even scheduling a full makeover for Friday afternoon. What hurt the most was realizing she'd never put this much effort into seeing me, not even when we were dating. Still, I had my own plans to prepare for. I wasn't going to let this meeting with Ronald happen without making my presence known. The evening had finally arrived, and Helen was acting like a nervous bride on her wedding day. When I got home from work, I found her in the bedroom, fussing over her overnight bag as if she were preparing for the most important trip of her life. It pained me to see her glowing with an excitement I'd never been able to ignite in her, not even when we first started dating all those years ago. Beaming, she told me to order a pizza for myself because she and Ronald would be dining at the new upscale spot in town, the Chateau de Rochambeau. I'd heard of the place. It was exclusive, the kind of restaurant that catered to the rich and well-connected. Clearly, Ronald wasn't just any man. He had money and connections to match. The doorbell rang, and Helen froze, panicking. "He's early. I'm not ready yet," she shrieked, looking frantically at her reflection in the mirror. "Can you keep him occupied for a bit?" Sighing, I walked to the door, shaking my head in disbelief. When I opened it, I was greeted by a tall, imposing man, at least 4 inches taller than my 5 feet 10 inches frame and about 40 pounds of solid muscle heavier. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his piercing eyes sized me up in a way that made me feel strangely inferior. He extended his hand with a warm yet commanding smile. "Hello, I'm Ronald Brown. I'm here to pick up Helen." I forced myself to shake his hand, feeling a pang of humiliation. So this was what Helen's father must have felt when I'd shown up to take her out for the first time. I didn't like the feeling one bit, but I managed to keep my composure. "Come in. I'm Travis, Helen's husband," I said flatly. "She's running a bit behind, but she'll be ready in about 20 minutes. Can I get you something to drink?" "No, thank you," Ronald replied as he sat down in a chair. "What I really wanted was to meet you." I raised an eyebrow, retreating to my own chair. "Well, that's interesting," I said dryly. "It's not every day the guy sleeping with another man's wife wants to meet her husband. Can't say I've got much experience in these situations. Do you?" Ronald chuckled, his confidence unshaken. "Actually, I do. That's why I wanted to meet you. Currently, I have 4 other wives I see regularly. If Helen and I hit it off, she'll make 5. For some reason, the idea of having an extramarital lover is a real thrill for some women." I caught the word regularly and felt a surge of anger. It was now clear that Helen's plans with Ronald went far beyond a single night. Swallowing my rage, I forced a calm reply. "Really? That's impressive. I guess it's reassuring to know there are more screwed up people out there than just my wife." Ronald smirked, clearly surprised by my bluntness. "Let me ask you something, Travis. You're not exactly thrilled about this, are you?" Keeping my face emotionless, I answered flatly, "No, I'm not. But does it really matter at this point? It's happening whether I like it or not." I leaned forward slightly. "So tell me, what are the husbands of these other women like?" His smile widened. "Well, first off, I wouldn't say I'm sleeping with them. I like to think we're making love." He leaned back in his chair, settling in as if he were about to tell a casual story. "But yes, some of their husbands are unique. One of them, for instance, likes his wife to tell him every little detail about our dates, especially the intimate parts. That seems to satisfy him. Another insists on, well, cleaning her up the moment she gets home. She can never stay overnight with me because he wants her fresh, so to speak. That one's a little weird, even for me. Ronald paused, studying my face for a reaction. Seeing none, he continued. Then there's the third husband. He's the real oddball. He actually waits on me when I visit their house, practically begging me to take his wife. Honestly, he creeps me out a bit, but his wife loves him, so she indulges him. The last guy, though, I feel for him. He's got a bad heart and can't be with his wife physically anymore. So he allows me to take care of her needs for him. Sometimes, I can see the pain in his eyes when I take her out, and I feel for him. Ronald locked eyes with me, his expression turning serious. But you're not like any of them, are you, Travis? For the first time that evening, I allowed myself a small, bitter smile. No, I said. Outside of understanding the pain of the guy with the bad heart, I can't relate to any of them. So let me ask you something. Why married women? What's the appeal? He didn't hesitate. That's an easy one, he said. I'm a wealthy man, and single women tend to see that as an opportunity. They want a piece of my fortune, and I don't have time for gold diggers. Married women, on the other hand, already have someone waiting for them at home. They're not looking to move in or make demands. They're grateful, they're eager, and they don't complain afterward. It's simple. There's no sneaking around with me, Ronald said with an air of pride. The husbands all know and even approve. It keeps things fresh and exciting. I don't need some gold-digging single woman when there are plenty of married ones willing to fulfill my needs. Companionship, romance, and sex. All without the drama. He looked at me, his expression curious, like he was trying to figure me out. Travis, let me ask you something. If you're so against this, why did you agree to it? I met his gaze, my face unreadable. I didn't have much of a choice, I said flatly. Helen made it clear it was either this way, or she'd do it behind my back. So, I told her to do what she felt she had to do. But, Ronald, I'm confident everything will work out in the end. A flicker of unease passed over Ronald's face, as though he'd just caught on to the implication of my words. He leaned forward in his chair, his tone softening. Travis, I know your wife loves you. She's mentioned it in every one of her emails. If you want, I'll call this off right now and leave. I felt a sharp ache in my chest as I responded quietly. Have you ever considered that she only wrote that to convince you? Or maybe even herself? Ronald nodded slowly, as if he genuinely understood what I was saying. In a different world, I might have respected him, even liked him, but not tonight. Don't worry about your date, I said. Go ahead and have a good time. As far as I'm concerned, the die is cast, and what's done is done. Ronald hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then, with a raised eyebrow, he asked, This night isn't going to end well for Helen, is it? Look, before you do something you'll regret, let me make something clear. I have no emotional attachments to your wife. This is purely physical. You know that, right? I studied him for a moment before replying. You're a sharp guy, Ronald. I can see why you're successful in business. But here's the thing. You might only want her body, but you can't take that without ripping apart the soul of this marriage. That's the price, and it's not yours to pay. Ronald looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time. I'm sorry, Travis, he said quietly. This was never my intention. Before I could respond, Helen breezed into the room, glowing with excitement. She looked stunning, like a movie star stepping onto the red carpet. Her confidence radiated in every step, and her outfit left no doubt about the impression she was hoping to make. Ronald stood as she approached, and without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. Watching them, I felt a wave of anguish wash over me. How had I let things get to this point? Why hadn't I insisted on therapy when this madness began? But it was too late for regrets now. When their kiss ended, Ronald turned to her, his voice low and almost regretful. Baby, he said, why don't you give your husband a goodbye kiss? Like it's the last one he'll ever get from you. Helen turned to me with a wicked smile that sent a chill down my spine. There was a hunger in her eyes, a promise of what was to come. She sauntered across the room, her hips swaying seductively, and stopped in front of me. Sliding her arms around my shoulders, She leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I know how much you love me, and I'm so grateful for this. Consider this a down payment." Then she kissed me, soft and tender, and before I realized it, tears were streaming down my face. When she pulled away, her expression shifted to one of concern. "Don't cry, my sweet husband," she said reassuringly. "Remember, my love is only for you. Ronald might have my body tonight, but you'll have it back tomorrow, good as new." With those words, she turned away, her attention back on Ronald. Taking his hand, she spoke in a voice thick with desire. "Well, lover, let's begin our adventure." I watched as they left the room, Helen clinging to his arm like a schoolgirl with her first crush. Ronald escorted her to his Lexus, opening the door for her like a perfect gentleman. They kissed again before she slid into the passenger seat, and as the car pulled away, I stood there, staring into the night, wondering if I'd ever be the same. Before they even reached the end of the street, I placed my wedding band on the dining room table along with a note. Earlier that week, I'd taken the ring to a jeweler and had them cut it in half. On one side of the cut, I had the year we got married engraved. On the other, the current year. It was symbolic, our beginning and our end. The fact that Helen hadn't noticed I hadn't been wearing it for days said more than words ever could. She was so preoccupied with her own desires that I had all but disappeared from her world. The note was simple and to the point. "Helen, when I said you should do what you had to do, it wasn't approval. It wasn't acceptance. It was merely acknowledgement of the choice you made. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I'm starting fresh without you. The house is yours. I've signed the quitclaim deed. Most of the savings are yours, too. I hope you find happiness and live a good life." As for the ring, I had it cut to reflect the moment our love broke, just as you did. Do you remember when you asked me how much I loved you? I told you my love was like that ring, unending, forever. Well, the cut now marks where that love ended, broken by betrayal. Engraved on the ring are the two moments that defined us, when we started and when it all fell apart. Tomorrow, you'll be served with divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I can't think of a more fitting reason. I wish you the best in your new job. I know you'll excel. Have a good life, Helen. Travis. Helen never believed I'd go through with it. She thought I'd come around, that I'd been the way I always had. But not this time. There was no bending left in me. When I handed her the divorce papers, the shock on her face was almost heartbreaking. She didn't think it was real, convinced this was just another argument, another bump we'd work through. But for me, it was final. I wasn't interested in being part of her new adventure. I wanted a partner, not someone who had already checked out of our life together. At first, she fought back. She called, texted, and left long voicemails pleading with me to reconsider. She swore she'd never meant for things to go this far, apologized profusely, and admitted it was a mistake. But by then, it didn't matter. The damage was done, and there was no repairing what she had broken. I refused to speak to her directly. Every word passed through my lawyer. She pushed for court-mandated counseling, probably hoping to buy herself more time, but I wouldn't budge. The court insisted, but I stood firm. There was no point in pretending we could fix something so irrevocably shattered. The divorce dragged on for a year. 12 long months of legal back and forth. Helen delayed at every turn, clinging to the remnants of what we'd been. But I stayed resolute. I'd spent years letting her control the narrative, and I wasn't about to let her drag this out any longer than necessary. When it was finally over, the day the divorce was finalized felt like the first time I truly breathed in years. It wasn't easy. There were moments I doubted myself, moments when giving in seemed simpler, but I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't the life we'd built together. I wanted something real, something honest, and that wasn't with her. I haven't spoken to Helen since the day I filed the papers. She's a ghost from a chapter of my life that's closed for good. I don't know much about her now, other than what I've heard from mutual acquaintances. She's still in the house we used to share, but it's quiet now. Men come and go, just as she wanted, but none stay. They use her for a night, maybe two, and then leave. What she's left with isn't love or acceptance. It's a revolving door of emptiness. It's ironic how hard she fought for this life, and now it's all she has. As for me, life is better than I could have imagined. After the divorce, I adopted two German shepherds, Alex and Rita, and they've been my saving grace. We hike every weekend, rain or shine, and their loyalty reminds me every day that companionship doesn't have to come with betrayal. I also met someone, Janet. She's everything Helen wasn't. A widow who lost her Marine husband a few years back. She's steady and kind, with a quiet strength that grounds me in a way I've never felt before. There are no games with her, no power struggles, no restless need for something outside of what we have. She values loyalty, honesty, and commitment, things I'd thought I'd never have again. Helen once told me I was boring, not adventurous enough. But if this is boring, I'll take it. I have my dogs, my health, and a woman who loves me for who I am. Meanwhile, Helen has an empty house and a bed that's only warm for a few fleeting hours at a time. Maybe that's what she wanted, but as I sit here next to Janet, watching her pet Alex with a contented smile, I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel. Bye.